It is now 6 o'clock. Good evening, everybody. My name is Greg Ferris, President of the Forney ISD Board of Trustees, and I hereby call the Forney ISD Board of Trustees meeting to order and certify that a quorum is present and that the meeting has been posted in the time and manner required by law. At this time, we're going to take item number 12 out of order, and the board will convene into closed session. We'll go in closed session 6:01, and we'll reconvene back into open session following. The closed session will be held under Code 551074 and 551071. No voting will take place in closed session. Any action the board wishes to take will result in discussions in closed sessions will take place after we convene back into open session. Thank you. It is now 7 o'clock and we'll reconvene back into open session. We do have a quorum present with now 7 p.m. as we move on to item number 3, introduction to our meeting and our invocation. This evening, if you'll rise with me, our invocation will be led by Christopher Andrews.
Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for letting us join in here tonight as a board and as a Forney family. Be with us to use wisdom and discernment as we make choices for our kids and our faculty and our administration in this district. Be with us as we go about the rest of our summer. Help us to enjoy that time and come back refreshed for the new school year. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Remain standing for our pledges. Ms. Green will lead us in our pledges.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you. Moving on to item 4 is the 2021-22 budget public hearing. At this time, we'll go into public hearing. I need to have a motion. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mrs. Green. Thank you very much. Mr. Chase? No, sir.
How about now? Good? All right. We are here tonight to talk about the 2022 budget. Wow, 2022, it's just doesn't seem, it's gone quick, it seems like, this whole year. But anyway, we're here tonight to talk about the budget and just kind of as a review. We've had a couple budget workshops between this spring, I think in March, and now. We've also had a couple board action items. We've approved our staffing plan for the year, and as well as the teacher salary schedule. And so a lot of the things that are in the budget that we're going to talk about tonight, you guys have seen this before, but we'll just we'll give you an overview in the final budget that we're proposing for adoption. So just to start out with, we sent the budget book out to you guys, I think on June 21st, I believe it was. And it was also included in their background information in your board book you received last Thursday. That budget book, just like in the past 7 years that we've done budgets together, was organized in the 4 different sections. The first section, the introductory section, it basically included a summary of all the other sections in the budget document. So if you didn't read anything else other than those first 10 or 15 pages, that would pretty much give you a pretty good overview of our budget for the year. In the organizational section, for those folks out in our school district that are interested in how we're organized, both at the board level, how our administrative team is organized, what accounting processes we use, the account number structure that uses each line item in our actual budget, our budget policies, and our development process was all included in that section. And then the actual meat of the budget was in the financial section, which included all the estimated revenues and appropriations for the 2022 budget, both combined and individually by each fund that the board is responsible for approving, as well as comparative data for the last 5 years for those appropriations and revenues. And then finally, we put in an informational section in here in the budget that basically gives an in-depth look that our property values are our historic tax rates, tax collections, student enrollment, and staffing levels. And so it's a pretty comprehensive document. I think if you were interested in what's going on in our school district, you pretty well get a pretty good idea by financially anyway of what we're doing in the district. Just to start out with enrollment, I think everybody's pretty well aware of this at this point, but this is the building block of how we develop our budget. It determines the number of teachers that we need, the amount of state aid that we receive. It's used to determine how many seats in classrooms that we need, and so that directly involves facility planning, which we're doing a lot of these days. We do use a demographer. As you know, Rocky is our demographer. He works for Templeton Demographics, and they have projected that our student enrollment is going to increase 1,309 students this next year. On average, over the next, I'd say 10 years, I think it is, we're expected to grow 6.5% year over year. But this next year, if you just, that year stands alone, it's a 10% increase, 10.3 if my memory serves me correctly. So a lot of rapid growth going on in the district right now, and so our budget is going to grow pretty rapidly accordingly. So just graphically illustrated, you've seen this before as well. In 2017, we had 9,700 students. In 2021, this last October, we had 12,700 in change. So that was about a 3,000 student increase. And then from now until 2026 October, we're projected to grow another 6,000 students. So the curve is steepening up a bit, as you well know. And all the planning that's going on behind the scenes in order to prep for that many kids. So just kind of look at our property values real quick. We talked about this in our last budget workshop, but we see our values, we're estimating they're going to increase this year 18%, and that's based on the preliminary cert that we got, and still we made some allowances on value that would be lost through protest. We still feel pretty good that number will be 18%. We won't get that final certification until July. And once we get that, from that point forward, then we'll be free to adopt the tax rate and move on. And that would be the final piece of the budget for the year to get off and rolling. But just looking at this individually, if you look at that first level, single family, obviously that's residential property. That's our biggest portion of our property values. Over the last 5 years, it's gone up about 80 or so percent. It's increased $2.2 billion. It was $2.8 billion in 2017, and it's going to be just north of $5 billion in 2021. So substantial increase in residential property, and there's no surprise. Any street corner you drive down into the district, you can see dirt turning and houses going up. The next one that we've increased a lot in is commercial value. I think we've gone up about 40% or so in that category as well. It was just north of $1 billion in 2017, and it's about $1.5 billion is what we're estimating in 2021. And so the other categories are small in comparison, but those are the two major categories I wanted to point out to the board. But 18% is what we're using to build our budget on, or what we use to build the budget on. As far as the combined budget goes, and this is combined budget is the general fund, food service, debt service. That's what you're required to approve tonight as far as the budget goes. And those combined revenues for those three funds totaled $160.5 million. The appropriations will be $157.7 million. And so what that looks like basically is if you break it out into these three parts, the general fund is 78% of the total combined budget at $122 million, $122.1 million. The next would be debt service, which is 19% of the budget at $30.3 million, and then finally food service is the other 3% at $5.4 million. So drilling into the general fund, it is the largest fund. The major sources of revenue here are property taxes and state aid. It accounts for about 98% of the total revenues for the fund. 82% of the budget is payroll. We're a very labor-intensive organization, so that's no surprise that most of the budget would be tied up in payroll costs. We've looked at all the assumptions that went into building the budget before, but I'll just hit some high points real quick. As far as the revenue side of the estimated revenue, 2 years ago, the 86th legislature revamped public education financing or funding. And they increased the basic allotment quite a bit to 6160, and the guaranteed yield went up some, as well as the guaranteed yield in the second level, which we don't get any of right now. Those are for districts that pass a tax rate election. But we do have the 5 enrichment pennies that we have approved by prior board action here, and so we get about $6,660 dollars per kid, give or take, and that's on not a weighted basis. So it's actually each kid can be weighted more than one student for different kind of programs that they're involved in. But essentially, about $6,660 a kid is what we get, and that appropriation didn't change this legislative cycle. It's still the same amount as it was approved 2 years ago. They did tinker with the formula a little bit. We did wind up getting a little bit more fast growth funding, which it's not included in the budget tonight that's presented, because of the time we got the information from the state that they did approve that. We were a little bit too far into this budget process, but we will bring that back to you in a budget amendment in the near future. As far as enrollment goes, again, we talked about this already. We built a budget on having a 1,309 student increase. A total enrollment of 14,000, just over 14,000 next year, which is a 10.3% increase from the this past school year. Property tax is 18%, and the tax rate we're looking at it being the same as it was the prior year. I think there is a possibility that the tax rate on the M&O side that funds the general operations. General fund operations, it could go down slightly. It's not going to go down a lot, but I do think from the latest word that we got from TEA, it's based on the statewide average. If it goes up by more than 2.5% statewide, then they further compress that rate. The initial thought was they weren't projecting more than a 2.5% increase, but now it may be slightly above that. So the rate's not going to be a whole lot less than 87.47, but it could potentially be a slightly lower than that when it's all said and done. We get our final certifications, and the INS rate we're proposing to leave that at 50 cents still. Just looking at the general fund revenue sources. Just locally, we get about 47% that to fund the general fund operations. The other, almost 52% comes from state, and we get a small amount, 1% for federal sources. We're projecting a $12 million increase in revenues over the year from the prior year comparison, which is about 10.9% increase from the prior year. And again, if you look at it, we're expecting 10.3% student growth increase. It makes sense that our revenues would grow approximately by the same amount. As far as moving on to the expenditure assumptions, we did build into the budget a 3% of midpoint pay increase for our staff. We do have 1% retention pay still in the budget for the staff that we usually pay out in November. By prior board action, you increased our staffing personnel by 187 personnel units for the year. Each campus, when we build their budgets, we give them a per student allotment, and those allotments, the high school, we give them $100, and that funds things like consumable office and teaching supplies and copy machines. That's the bulk of what they spend their money on. At the middle school, they get $89 a student, intermediates $81, and finally elementary's at $75. We've got money in the budget for maintenance projects or contingencies, security upgrades, school buses, capital improvements. We also are making payments on the tax notes for money that we borrowed last year or the end of the year before, I think, to fund some capital improvements that we did in the district this last year. And then finally, on the technology side, we give students. We started out at 4 through 12, giving every student a Chromebook. I think we're down to 3 through 12 now, and they still have several Chromebooks in the classrooms for K through second grade. But there's money in the budget for next year to maintain that and to build capacity there if we need to. And then we got that lease payment in the budget to cover the infrastructure, wireless infrastructure upgrades that we did about 7 years ago. And this is the final payment, by the way, for in the 2022 year. And it may be at some point here in the near future, we may look at our wireless network again. I'm not sure exactly where that is on the technology list. Right now, we are doing core switching upgrades and some other things in the district to improve our adding bandwidth and so forth. And so we're constantly looking to increase our technology capacity in the district. And as you know, that's a large part of our educational process these days is the use of technology. So very, very important we stay on top of that. As far as the general fund budget or the fund balance, the board's goal is to have two months. At the end of this year, we're projecting that we'll have 3.7 months of operating expenses. So I mean, we're in pretty good shape there, fund balance wise, and feel really good about that. Just to look at the general fund as a whole, this is the format that you will be approving tonight. This is just the general fund portion of the budget, though. Again, we've already talked about this. The revenues is $122.1 million, or 10.9% increase over the prior year. Expenditures are again, it's a balanced budget, so it's $122.1 million. It's only 2.5% increase over the prior year, and you'd think intuitively, you say, well, if the revenues are going up 10%, why isn't the expenditures going up? Well, if you'll remember, we've talked about this a lot, but we've had a large expenses for capital improvements in the general fund this past year, which total, you know, we have about a $9 million budget deficit, but the year before we had almost a $14 million budget surplus, and so those things kind of work themselves out over the years, because when we close our year out in June 30th, we still got summer projects going on, and we have to reappropriate the funds and what have you. But if you strip all that out and didn't make the comparison, it's about a 10% increase, just like the revenue is. But that's the general fund budget. So the summary again: 10.9% increase in estimated revenue, 2.5% increase in expenditures, 3% pay increase, 1% retention pay. It is a balanced budget. We're looking at our overall fund balance at the end of 22 to be $37.5 million. Or 3.7 months of operating expenses at a tax rate of 87.47, or maybe slightly lower depending on what our final values are and the final state values are in July. So moving on to food service, again, this accounts for the operations of the district's cafeterias. We're estimating a 10.1% increase in both revenues and appropriations. This one is a balanced budget as well, and this comparison, this 10.1% increase is actually compared to a budget that would have been in a normal year. As you know, this last year wasn't normal, and so our revenues and expenditures don't exactly, you know, we're only running about anywhere from 60 to 70% of what our actual budget was as far as total expenditures and revenues for the year. But when you compare it on a normal year, what we were expecting it to be a normal year last year and what we're expecting to be a normal year this next year, it's up 10.1%, which is basically in line with the amount of students that we're increasing. So just to look at that again, we're a total of $5.4 million in both revenues and expenditures. It's about just short of a $500,000 increase in both cases. And again, it's a balanced budget, so there will be no fund balance in this fund at the end of the year. Finally, the debt service, as the name suggests, this is where we account for principal and interest on and fees for all the bonded debt that the school has and the payments that we make for that bonded debt. 99% of the revenues collected in this fund comes from property taxes. We get very little state aid anymore out of this fund because on a per pupil basis, we're actually higher over the threshold of what EDA existing debt allotment or the instructional facilities allotment. I think the cutoff is $35 per penny per pupil, and we're collecting more money than that on our taxes right now. So there's very little support in that area, like compared to if you go back into our recent past, 5 or 6 years ago, we were getting a few $1 million in those categories, but it's all pretty much local revenues now. Just to look at this, we're looking at $33.1 million in revenues. That's about a 19.8% increase. And again, if you think of in terms of our property values going up 18%, you'd think this would only be going up 18%. But I think I mentioned this in our last budget workshop that our actual collections in our this current year, they're up about 1.5 to 2% over what our budget is. And so, if you figure that our budget's like 1.5 to 2% low in 21, then if you add that into the mix, then really it's only about an 18% swing when you look at actual versus the budget that we're projecting this next year. Same thing with well, not the same thing, but the moving on to expenditures, we have $30.3 million of expenditures, and that's about what $4.5 million or so increase from the prior year. We do have a scheduled cash defeasance that we're making in '22. We approved that back last September, but the actual payments won't be made until August, and so that's kind of included in the mix here and driving that up a little bit. We do have a fund balance in this fund, almost 2.8 million, and you know, because of the way our cutoff works, we've talked about this many times, but you know, our fiscal year ends on June 30th, but our big debt service payment is due 45 days later, so you have to have a fund balance in order to make that debt service payment in the following fiscal year. And so just to kind of summarize that, in 2022, at the end of 22, we were expecting to have a debt service fund balance of $30.2 million. Our August 22 debt service payments is 16.4, so we still have about $14 million there of capacity. We usually keep about 25% of that of our debt service payment in our fund balance to smooth out any edges in case we had a delinquent taxpayer, like, you know, for instance, if our power plant was delinquent one year, we'd want to have a little bit of cash reserved in order to smooth that out until we got the money from them, you know, on down the road. So the bond rating agencies like to see you have a little bit of a fund balance in there. So between $6 and $7 million is about that the right dollar amount. So that would leave us about another, you know, $6 million, I guess, of surplus. And what we've done in past years is taken that and actually cash defeased bonds and save the interest expense for the future. We still feel like that's the best approach. We do also have some bonds that we're going to be selling in August of 21 to finish out Johnson and Willett, and we're estimating that those interest payments that we'll be making on that will total about $1.4 million of that $6 million. So we'll still have about $5 million or so to do the cash defeasance, and we'll bring that plan to you in September when we actually approve the tax rate and ask the board to approve that plan. But anyway, that's pretty much the plan for the debt service at a 50-cent tax rate. And just going forward, we'll get our certified tax value again on July 25th. Anytime after that point, we're free to adopt the tax rate. I think we initially had our budget meeting in September set for the 13th, but we may back that up a little bit. I know our tax office, they'd like to get our final approved value or tax rates as early as they possibly can, because they have to send notices out to taxpayers. And if we can back that meeting day up the week before, I think Labor Day is that Monday. We don't meet on that day, but I don't. We might have a plan for you to actually have move that meeting to that Tuesday night. I'm not sure if we've discussed that yet, but that's kind of the plan, I believe. But anyway, that's the budget. If there's any questions specifically, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Chase. Do board members have any questions? John, could you clarify, Dr. Terry and I have kind of been debating this, on your property values, and you list the top 10, are our new distribution centers not going to show up until next year?
I think there may be some, but not all of that is in there because of the way they put the value that was on the ground as of January, I believe, is when they put that's what they value your taxable value for the fall of 2021. So some of it is, but I don't know that all of it is.
Okay. There's a couple of big ones out there off Gateway that aren't showing up on here.
I believe that Amazon specifically, I do not believe all their value is on this taxable year. I think some of it is, but not all of it.
Goodyear is older. It opened first.
I believe Goodyear's 100%. I think of their value is on this one this time, because I think when we looked at the tax roll here recently, and we went out there to look at all the things that were listed there, I thought they had 100% of their value. Last year there was a piece of it, but not a lot. But I think this year it's up to like 80 or 90 million now, if I remember right.
John, I think what he's referencing is on page 106 is the top 10 property values.
Okay.
But I think that 16.4 2.2%, and that was in 2020, so that would have really been
That was,
as of January.
yes, because I didn't have the top 10
2019.
taxpayers for this year to put in that budget book. That was last year's value. That was last year's top 10. Yes, sir.
So we foresee then in that top 10 to grow Goodyear as
I
probably
think
our
that's
number
probably,
2, and then Amazon.
in this year, if
Amazon
we would have
following.
had the top 10 taxpayers from the appraisal district, I believe Goodyear would have definitely cracked into the top 10,
Yeah.
yes.
Because it should be over 100. Based on what I've seen, it should be over 100 million.
Yeah, well, because we give it a free forward exemption, they don't tax the property that's like stored inside the building, so it's just the building itself. It's just, a metal warehouse pretty much. So if my memory serves me right, it wasn't quite $100 million when we looked at the taxable value on it.
Well, it's broken up in about 5 different sections. If you add them all together, it's over 100, so I'm coming up with
Okay,
that.
oh, that may be a fair statement.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any questions from the audience about the budget? Spectators in the back, any questions?
Lenny?
Okay, I hear none. Do I have a motion to close our public hearing?
So moved.
Mr. Andrews, do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Johnson? Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Mr. Chase. We're moving on then to item number 5, our reports. The next 4 items are reports only, require no action from the board. 5A is the monthly financial report. Mr. Chase, take it away.
So we're here tonight to talk about the operating results for May. June we're just about ready to wrap it up too, so hopefully there'll be a lot of projects again in the month of June. I don't want to take up too much time here, but just like last year, we had to reappropriate $5 or $6 million worth of projects out of the general fund to the new year. We'll be doing something similar again this year because we're doing the aquatic training pool out of the general fund, and that just barely got started, and so all the money that we've appropriated for that will have to be reappropriated once we get the books opened up for this next year. But just to start off with, in May, we had $3.7 million worth of revenues that we collected. We had $8.7 million of expenditures. Year-to-date revenues collected was $90.8 million, or 82% of the amount estimated. And year-to-date expenses was $101 million, or 85% of the amount appropriated. And these percentages are pretty close to where they've been in prior years as well. So looking pretty good there. Moving on to food service, this is a little different story. We've talked many board meetings about this, but as far as May goes, we've collected almost $515,000 in revenues. We had $401,000 of expenses. Year-to-date revenues is $3.2 million, or 62% of the amount estimated, and expenses year-to-date was 3.8, or 77% of the amount appropriated. So hopefully by this time next board meeting, when we give our June report, we'll have all the accruals and things posted up, and we'll know with a fair degree of certainty where we wound up in the food service budget for the year. But it's still looking pretty well on target, what we've talked about in the last several meetings. We feel like it's we'll probably have to make anywhere from $100,000 to $200,000 support payment out of the general fund in order to zero this budget out. We're not presenting a debt service report tonight because in the last two or three meetings we've been 100% collected and 100% expended, so there's really not a whole lot of activity to report there. But finally, on the cash and investment report for the month of May, we've got $161 million in cash, and the largest portion of that is in our capital projects budget of almost $82 million. We're sitting on that alone. So that's the monthly financial report. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Chase. Any questions? Here none, we'll move on then to 5B, Resilient School Support Program Update. Dr. Judy Weber.
Mr. Ferris, Dr. Terry, and school board members, I'm pretty excited to explain a little bit about the partnership we've been afforded this year and last year through a program TEA started. We were partnered with Ed Direction through the Resilient School Support Program, and a little over a year ago, TEA put out some information for like a grant to get extra support during the COVID year when we were trying to figure out how we were going to do virtual learning. And so year one was really support for virtual learning. We were partnered with Ed Direction. Now they're a educational support firm. They work nationwide. It's not just a Texas firm. So we've been really happy with the resources we've received from them because they have such a big perspective since they work with school districts and LEAs all over the district. So this is a little bit of a recap of year one. We weren't sure if we were going to renew for year two because we weren't sure where virtual learning was going. TEA contacted us and asked us, please join this again. So we're one of 40 LEAs in the state that has received the extra help and support through Ed Direction and then from TEA in the Resilient School Support Program. So a little bit of a recap. Year one, they really helped us develop, monitor, and evaluate our virtual program. And that's really where Forney got some kind of notoriety on how strong our program was because these partners like Ed Direction started talking to other school districts. TEA started giving our information out to other school districts. We started getting a lot of contacts really through this kind of partnership. One thing the RSSP program does is also put us in cohorts of other districts between, say, 12 and 20,000. So we were put in a cohort of schools and shared ideas. And most of those meetings went like this. What's Forney doing? And then we heard crickets from them, and then so we started sharing what all they were doing. So our virtual program was really successful. So year two outcomes as we move into year two, they're really looking at this year's focus being on accelerated learning, which will probably be the term we use moving forward to fix the unfinished learning and then fix any gaps from students who were at home and really were a little bit behind because of some of the structures of their home situation. So they're going to provide some strategic planning, some implementation support as we move into next year. They do provide coaching and they'll provide professional learning for teachers, our principals, administrators, whatever we need. And then we are also in a cohort this year of similar schools as we look to how we will all collectively as a state help our students be successful. So they have a large team of members supporting us, and then who led this really last year was Sandy Whitley and Stacy Joseph. And Stacy's going to go ahead and join us this year, even if our focus is on recovery, because we plan on using many of the great techniques we learned through virtual learning to help our students. But you can see quite a bit of our teams are on there. And then we're going to focus on a few specific campuses this year that showed some specific need that Ed Direction felt like we could really target. So one of the things they did last year, they'll actually use our data and help synthesize it. They also provided a survey to our parents and families, a survey to teachers. They brought a focus group, conducted it virtually with our counselors, and then evaluated every bit of student data that we had available to provide some trends and data reflections, and then use this information to show areas of strength and need. So there's it's a lot of words here, but the first thing they noticed was even during the COVID year, Forney had some very good successes in our virtual education program. In fact, our STAR data shows, Dr. Owen has broken it down between virtual and face-to-face, and in several grade levels and in our ELAR test in particular, our virtual students scored higher than our face-to-face. Some of our kids who were home had involved parents that read to them, read and did most of our ELAR stuff. So they felt like we've had some great successes with our virtual learning program. They also did some engagement studies and found that their elementary teachers, of course, had the greatest success with engagement. And then with some of the parents, I know the range is kind of large there, but the vast majority of our parents felt very supported by the school last year, even during the COVID situation, even if their kids were home for the remainder of the year. So when we get down to bullet 3, we realize that we now have some intensive work to do with some of our students, and so RSSP's focus this year will be on accelerating learning for any student who needs it. What the data also is really showing that this is a nationwide issue, and that what data they have with being partnered with Ed Direction, nationwide look is that they're seeing the same trends, mostly in math nationwide. So our data matches what they have found, what TEA's found, in matching nationwide data. And so then one of the comments in the study was that many of the parents were looking forward to coming back and then regaining the learning that even some of our parents felt like that we had last year. So I kind of put together, this is the kind of data that they've provided for us. They're looking at all of our data, and I know there's a lot here, but what I gave you a snapshot is district-wide reading data, 2019 to 2021. And you can see that not met in reading, yeah, it went up, and approaches, that level is 28% and 28%, those are the same. Our meets didn't go down much, and we lost a little bit at the mastery level. But when you look at our math data, you see we suffered district-wide the greatest losses in math skill as far as it's reflected on the STAR test. And how we know it's a skill gap and not something that our teachers intentionally, there wasn't something wrong with our COVID classroom or COVID structure. When we lose 32% of our kids mastered in 29, and that drops to 17%, that's our top-tiered kids. And when they struggle at mastering the STAR test, we have gaps. Kids aren't capable of getting those perfect scores and those top scores. So EdDirection has analyzed, of course, all of our data, and when we lose proficiency at all levels, we know that kids are missing skills from prior 2 years that's impeding their success into the next year. Well, this is coinciding with a couple House bills. House Bill 4545 is an accelerated learning bill that is very extensive and gives us a lot of detail on what we need to do. And then House Bill 1525 is providing extra funds for learning acceleration. So there'll be a big focus on math in this upcoming year to try to regain skills that kids may have missed from the 3-month shutdown back in 2020 that provided a gap in 2020-21, and now if we don't fix those gaps, forever their math skills will be hindered. So in summary, EdDirection's providing a district-wide template for progress monitoring. House Bill 4545 will require us to monitor every student who was unsuccessful on the STAR test and monitor their progress for the next couple years. They're helping us identify targeted student objectives. This would be district-wide, and so not just kind of left up to one teacher or another, but collectively, what are these SEs and our TEKs that we'll need to really focus on to regain learning? Then we're working on the beginning process of creating remediation lessons and activities. The House Bill 4545 is pretty clear. We need to create supplemental resources for our teachers. Our teachers need to teach like they should, teach the FRCs, and we'll come in with supplemental resources for our teachers and staff to provide the extra learning needed. And then we'll implement the learning plan for every student who was unsuccessful and then monitor the progress throughout the year. So EdDirection already provided today with a district-wide template that we can build on and say, yes, okay, at 3rd grade it looks like this, or at 4th grade, and at algebra, how this looks. So we're partnered with them. We meet weekly. They can provide pretty much anything we ask for. So it's like having a second set of data analysts and supports to help our learning team really work for the next 2 years to fill the gaps that have been created through the COVID crisis. So it's kind of a summary of what we've been doing last year and where we're headed this year. So I'd like to see if there's any questions.
One question. You said that we're in line with what's happening nationwide. Would you say that's statewide?
We don't have the statewide data. Parents of the parent portal can now see, EOCs came out first, where they can see their own student data and the SE data. The state has not released their data compared to ours. Parents can now see their student SE data now in elementary. That just came out, but it's not populated into our EduGen's data mining program. So I don't really know how we're doing statewide. What I do have is our data compared to 2019. I also have for each grade level what percentage of students took the test, because that will impact state data. A district that had very few kids take the test, but those who came to school, well, on many of our campuses, we had 95% of our students take the test. Well, that means we brought in a lot of these kids who were home, took the test. It obviously waned by the time you get to high school, where 80-some% of our students took the test. And some schools they might have had 90% of their students take a test versus Claiborne had 95, for example. So that will really impact state data, because unless they tell us how many of their kids took the test, it's not really apples to apples. If you,
Nowhere, I'm guessing in the country. Yeah.
right.
Right.
But we want the, right,
Yeah.
we want the state data for sure.
Yeah, just to add to that a little bit, probably the biggest challenge our learning team's gonna face this year is we don't have good apples-to-apples comparison to create relative data. We have student individual data, which will identify, growth gaps, and whatever we need to create from an individualized intervention plan. But I'd caution us all to think that we're gonna be able to compare ourselves to other districts or other states or even other nations. Even internally, our campuses and how the kids came back at each quarter really impacts the relativity of the data itself and how we can compare it. So we are really kind of taking a step back and not looking at data in a way of comparison, but looking at data in a way of this is what a starting point to where we can grow our kids. So I hope that clarifies, because I know we're used to being able to take data and compare. In this crazy year, it's really not
In fact, the
feasible to
state
do so.
turned off some of those programs they normally provide for us to look at our data and predict letter grades. They've taken all that down. We just have raw data. But we are planning on taking every child and looking at their beginning of the year starting point, and then have a path for them, and then look at map data, and then look at the November interim, and look at January map data, because we are going to closely monitor every child's growth this year compared to the starting point that we had with this recent STAR test, to make sure that we grow. We've got to fill the gaps that have been created throughout the last year and a half.
It would seem like that's all over.
Yeah.
Mr. Ferris, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Even though there's not state data to compare to, there's no doubt that every district has these gaps, correct? And so by us having this partnership with Ed Direction, this just gives us more of the ability to go and correct those gaps, correct? So we're very lucky to be part of this, is what I'm hearing.
We're very thankful that we joined a year and a half ago, because, the TEA is like, hey, you want to do something? And it kind of perceives as, could it be extra work? Will we get much benefit? We didn't know who we'd be partnered with. And we jumped out on a limb, and they've been very proactive. They've looked at all of our STAR data already. And we meet, and it gives you another set of eyes to say, well, are you seeing this? Are you planning on doing this? Let us take the burden of the work and create these templates that every school, every campus, every teacher will need to use as we progress monitor. And they've already read House Bill 4545, and they're starting to head on that work too. Hours of outside work they're providing for us.
It's a partnership is the way I would describe it, because TEA is learning from Forney in this new era, just like Forney's learning from the other groups that are part of this. And so just to make your comment even more relative, 40 districts out of over 1,200, and we're in that group, so.
It's a challenge that every district's going to have.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we have a partner to help us.
No further questions. We'll move on then to 5C, Early Childhood and Literacy Update.
All right, this one is somewhat related in that from third through our end of course, we have STAR data. The state implemented, back with that large House Bill 3 from the previous legislative session, a progress monitoring system for pre-K through third grade. Third grade has got a double system that we have to follow. The early childhood data collection, plus we get STAR data on these students. This is coming out of the real need to improve early literacy, knowing that by the time we get a third grade STAR data, the kid is ready to go into fourth grade, and it's too late if we've missed something in their ability to learn to read. So the state put in some reports, but without a systematic test, system-wide common assessment like STAR, the state just said, assess your kids through the TPRI, Texas Primary Reading Inventory, opened up a portal called TextKia through Children's Learning Institute, and then said, give these early assessments and then set a goal, or really, they had you set a goal, give these early assessments, and now I'm going to present how we're doing at reaching these goals. But there was no prior STAR data, no precedent for us to base things on. We based everything pre-COVID. Then we faced COVID, and now I'm going to give you some really strange data on how we're doing pre-K3. But you have to bear in mind, there's no state data. There was no precedent on how to set goals. We met with our principals, looked at our prior data, changed to a new assessment the state put in place, and then now we're going to measure how we did. We do have to report by subpopulation and by campus, and so I'm going to share kind of some snippets because I think there's some work to be done in our attainment of goals for early literacy. So this all stems from House Bill 3. So if you look at pre-K, we set these goals, and it's kind of a sentence under the blue line. The percentage of pre-K students that score on or grade level above in phonological awareness will increase from 65 to 75% by 2024, because that's when the state set a benchmark that we want to have our students at reading proficiency by 2024. So we kind of set a nice trajectory on goals, and then you see on pre-K, based on phonemic awareness, we're above target. So we're not sure if that means COVID didn't impact kids when they were 3 and 4 because they were home, and so we're on target, or do we have really great pre-K programs? This is our first year to report data, so without 2 years of trends, it's just kind of ambiguous. Well, then we look at our goal for kindergarten. We said based on blending that we would improve from 71 to 80% by 2024. So here we're kind of our benchmarks to set this along the way. And while we showed some growth, and those orange lines are where each campus kind of set their data, you can see that we're kind of all over the place. Well, once again, without prior data, is our goal incorrect, or do we now have an impact from kindergarten kids who some of them missed the last end of pre-K? We have a lot of evaluation. We grew throughout the year, the assessment's given 3 times a year, but a few campuses, Claiborne met their goal, Henderson was close. But you can see that we're off track on some of our others. So we need to kind of reevaluate our goals and look at really what's going on in kindergarten. We moved to first grade. We thought, okay, well, let's look at the TPRI assessment and see if we can increase from 37 to 39% on word reading. So can they recognize words? And then, well, all of a sudden in first grade, we met our goal with most campuses. And so overall, the district met that goal. Once again, without prior data, was our goal too low, or did something great happen in first grade that didn't happen in kinder, and yet we did great in pre-K? So again, there's more work to do as we study the data and figure out what are appropriate goals. So then we go to second grade, and our goal was really to work on complete reading, not word recognition, no more phonemic awareness. And when you see second grade, the whole district, every school is below. So do we have a COVID gap because they missed part of first grade and being at home? We had a large percentage of elementary kids at home. We have a lot of studying to do as to see if something is an error with our goal or with our learning processes and our data that came out of second grade. So Henderson, was close, but you can see when every campus is off track in second grade, we have some work to do to study what caused this, what do we need to do to improve as we move into third grade, which is a powerhouse reading year that we need to make sure they're proficient by the end of third grade. So then we look at our third grade goal, and we will increase STAR, of course, up to 2024, and then we looked at a STAR goal right in the middle of a COVID year, and again, we saw some great growth, but we're all over the place in meeting the goal, and here Claiborne did really well, and yet in second grade, they didn't. So once again, we don't know without long-term data what we need to do to adjust these goals, but because we do have goals, and here's the silver lining in this, we progress monitor kids in the STAR tested areas, and now we finally have state asking us to look at these kids in pre-K through third grade to make sure we're not leaving kids behind and it's caught on a third grade test. This is helping us evaluate our pre-K 3 program to make sure that all teachers are aware of data, that all students are tested, that all students are closely monitored if they are falling short in comparison to their peers and to other campuses. So we have some schools that are slightly off track with third grade compared to where we set our goal, but once again, we also had the COVID year, which added a level of complexity to trying to goal set and not really knowing where we would end on a new assessment. So kind of in summary, we know we've got some work to do, both because of COVID and as we learn the new assessment and then understand what are the best ways to work with early childhood literacy. So kind of in summary, pre-K and first, we're on track. First grade shows some great growth. Third showed high growth even though we missed our target. And then second grade looked like we need some major intervention as they move into third grade. And so we're already preparing for what do we do with our reading program and with our teacher training this summer. So we have been really working on the science of teaching reading. And then this district-wide systemic approach that we're required to do out of House Bill 4545, we can bring many of those things down to our younger grades and progress monitor kids who are off track. And then what LLI, what extra programs are we bringing in for them? So our targeted acceleration won't just be for kids who face a STAR test. We can really do it district-wide for any kid who is facing a learning gap. So a systemic approach for all children moving into the next few years. So that's kind of a summary. It'll be an annual report I give. I hope I have better information for you next year. I hope we understand more about how we should have set goals. We can always revisit our goals once we have some patterns to base things on. So just have questions.
Thank you, Dr. Weber. Any questions from the board?
We've got one.
Go ahead.
This was ELAR or literacy. Is there any idea or thought that this would be done for math skills as well?
Yes, the state did make that a part of House Bill 3, that we are supposed to do this with math, and then never provided an assessment or a way to monitor or track, or they gave us a framework here where we're supposed to even input our data. They never opened any portal like that for math. We're not sure if it was COVID related. They also asked us to do, years ago, math academies, and then did not provide even a bit of content. So TEA, we figure their focus really was on reading these next few years. We do have MAP and we have some math screeners. And I think looking at the gaps that we're seeing district-wide, third through algebra on math, we'll have to put and devote some attention to making sure our kids have those early numeracy skills. Because really, if they don't have those by the time they face the 6th grade year where math really jumps in intensity, we've created the same kind of gap for a kid. It's true.
Just looking at some of the data, it's just only because I don't know the answer to this. But
Can you turn your mic on, please, so they can hear you down here?
But it's striking how one campus is way up here in first grade, and then that same campus in the second grade dropped so much down. So I was just in my mind thinking, and I know our TEKs are all aligned across the district, but do we, and I don't know this, maybe I should know this, do we collaborate lesson plans across every grade and all campuses? Like, okay, this week, this is your plan, or I mean, is it just by campus, or do we do it across the district where we are?
Across the district. We have what I would call tight scope and sequences. In other words, in short chunks of time, schools all across the district have a guide that tells them what they teach. With our Future Ready lesson implementation, then that even gives them a framework for how to break up that window that range from, say, a really tiny math unit that's 8 days to a long 23-day ELAR unit, they're some of the longest, to a 15-day science unit. So our scope and sequence is tight into the fact that it even tells them how long and when an assessment is. We have common formative assessments now in all grade levels that really are giving our teachers, even down in with our youngest students, kind of evidence of how they're doing in attaining small chunks of information. So when we saw that dip where, say, Claiborne, second grade here they are at kinder 1 really high and then low second. Was there an error in our goal, or was there something unusual about that second grade group? Data makes us ask more questions because they do have a tight set of framework to follow.
Gotcha.
And then for them to shoot so high in third grade, and then Claiborne did phenomenally well in fourth grade star, our top school. We have to investigate what in particular happened with the second grade. Or is it small numbers and so it can get skewed easily, or is that the grade where they had the most kids that were virtual?
Right.
We have to figure out why in that one school did we see only second grade take a dip when the other grade levels were very high on
Yeah.
this assessment.
And I didn't mean to sound like I was questioning you. I was just, that process came in my mind, and
No,
so I was curious about the process.
It's a
as
good
far as-
question because we've really tightened things up, and in fact, next year we'll be even tighter. Our future-ready lessons that have been vetted and written will be more critical this year so that we really have tight alignment, and then we have a focus with additional support providing the intervention lessons necessary. Because we can't create further gaps here. We've got to be spot on this year and very tightly aligned teacher to teacher, campus to campus, and then provide the extra support for the kids who do have gaps based on last year's data. So that, yes, they have common curricular resources and schedules and assessments that help prevent such wide discrepancies between one teacher to one teacher or one campus.
Right.
Now, population, movement, growth, low SES,
Oh, sure.
those things impact, but not as much on our south side campuses.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any further questions? Hearing none. Thank you, Dr. Weber.
Thank you.
We'll move on then to item D, Master Planning Update. Ms. Kim Morsack, Chief of Everything.
Thank you, Mr. Ferris, Board. I'm actually going to ask Jeff Fisher from Gallagher Construction to come up and give you an update. As you know, we're kind of coming to the end of some projects and very beginning of some others, and we were very fortunate the last couple of weeks it dried up a little bit, which we needed desperately, and then it rained today. So I was at Jackson Roads, and they were about to do some stuff outside, and of course that got messed up a little bit, but hopefully it'll stay a little bit drier and we can get some of these behind us. But Jeff, if you want to kind of go through all the projects.
Thank you, Ms. Morsack. President Ferris, Dr. Terry, members of the board, good to be with you again. I'll run through these fairly quickly because they're in that stage of the process. Roads in Jackson, we're working through punch list on the academic areas and admin areas, finishing up work in the band and choir, art, kitchen, cafeteria, gymnasium type areas. Those will be being punched out over the next few weeks. I think we're planning on admin being able to move into the building sometime in mid-July is what we're shooting for. Obviously, the outside work will continue after that, and hopefully we'll get some grass on the ground pretty soon instead of just weeds that you see in that lower right-hand corner. They do have the irrigation mostly complete, and they're putting in trees and things like that. So that's moving forward. It's just been a matter of trying to get the grass out of the grass fields because it's been wet recently. I think they're getting ready to put the turf down on the field here in the next week or so. So that should be in process. It's just the mad rush of getting done in the summer. So things are moving along fairly well over there. Griffin, it's coming along good. The punch list is being worked on. Everything's really getting buttoned up over there real well. Again, landscaping is lagging just a little bit just because of the wet weather that we had. I believe admin's moving in there next week. Yeah, on the 7th. So that one will be getting ready for kids pretty soon. Johnson, the best thing I can tell you about the Johnson, Willett, North Forney, and Forney High is that in those pictures you see the blue in the background. That's been good for us until today, as Ms. Morsack mentioned. And I've seen the forecast for the rest of the week. It's going to be kind of touch and go. So But we're moving forward, getting utilities put in at Johnson. At Johnson and Willett, both really, utilities are going in. The Augercast piers started Friday, I believe, at Johnson, and they've been working on piers at Willett for a week or so, so that's all coming along pretty well. Again, pretty much just a bunch of dirt right now. North Forney Fieldhouse foundation, as you can see in the lower left-hand corner there, is coming along real well. Again, getting the site work done. The upper right-hand corner, you can see the turfs down on the field. Working on the baseball and softball fields, the subsoil work, subgrade works being done on those, chemical injection. They'll be getting those ready to lay turf on, and that project's moving along very well. And the Forney High School baseball and softball fields, again, blue skies in the background are always good. They've got the outfield, or the dugouts and the backstop grade beams poured, and they're working on pouring the curb around the outfield to get ready for the turf there. Once they get that outfield curb poured on both of those, then they'll start working on their subgrade for the fields and get that prep for turf as well. And I believe that is it. Be glad to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Any questions?
I had someone come up to me during the election and ask, what is that thing that looks like a prison that's being built over between the daycare and Crystal? I said, I think that's our new intermediate and middle school. But my question is, are we going to have any changes in that look so our community won't be calling it a prison? Is that,
What's what was the question?
are we going to do anything to the outside to make it look more, well,
I mean,
the side that's toward the street?
That's south elevation. Back of the gyms.
that's pretty much what it looks like. There'll be there's not even a fence that goes around back there, because the chain link fence goes around the other side. Eventually that portion of land, there's a 5-acre and a 10-acre tract on the other side, that the district will determine what they want to do with, but that is what the back elevation of the building looks like.
Yeah, the front elevation is mainly glass and decorative stone. So we might encourage them to swing around to the front of the building and get that perspective.
That's where
as
the
well.
marquees will be in the signage as well. I did want to add one thing. We do the technology portion. We purchase it in-house because we receive federal reimbursement for 50% of that through E-rate grants. And one of the reasons why Griffin can't be in until the 7th is because there's a national chip shortage. Thank you, COVID. And so we're waiting on some of the switches and gear to get in so that we can have phone and internet before we let people move in. So part of the delay on Griffin is that. We think we'll be able to get everything in. We have a backup plan for Jackson Roads because some of the switch gear has been delayed even further till October. But we have a backup plan to make sure that we're ready to go when school starts. I don't think it looks like a prison, by the way. Any other questions?
Thank you very much. I hear none. Moving on then to number 6, public forum. This time no one is signed up to speak at public forum, so move on then to number 7, consent agenda. 7A is approved minutes of June 1st, 21 budget workshop. 7B is approved minutes of June 1st regular board meeting. 7C is approved budget amendment. 7D is approved update 117 as a final reading. 7E is approved Jackson Middle School and Rhodes Intermediate School infrastructure and exterior improvement bids. 7F is approved Griswold Elementary drainage and site improvement bids. 7G approved campus fixtures, replacements, and repairs. The board may take action individually or collectively. Do I have a motion?
President Ferris, I move to approve consent agenda items A through G.
Thank you, Mr. Regan. Do I have a second? that Ms. Stone? Thank you very much. All in favor, say aye.
Ms. Dobbs.
Dobbs, okay. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? And I hear none. Thank you very much. Moving on to number 8, consideration and possible approval of board goals. Dr. Judy Weber.
And Dr. Terry, this is going to kind of be the final report coming out of our strategic planning that occurred this past spring. So we met together several times. We really evaluated our vision statement, our mission statement, and then one more focus of that strategic planning committee was then to help us frame some new board goals. So a little bit of history, these kind of same things occurred back in 2013 and 2017, and back in 2013, before when Dr. Terry joined your team, these were the board goals that we really lived under for the last 7 years, and there were 6 board goals, and we're all very familiar with them. And so these were presented to our strategic planning committee, as well as our vision and mission statement. And to kind of summarize the whole committee, they really answered these 4 questions, very much like some of the questions you answered, and then took the prior board goals, plus they're answering these questions about our foundation and our programs and future ready focus for the next year, and then reframed our board goals into 4. You'll notice some similarities between our prior board goals, but condensed them down to 4. And then these will be the 4 that we present on, that we base all of our board reports will fall under one of these that will kind of evaluate our progress throughout the next few years. So at this time, we recommend that we approve these board goals, and then we'll move forward and report to you on reaching them in the next, board report.
Thank you, Dr. Weber. Dr. Terry, what is your recommendation?
Thank you, Mr. Ferris. Very appreciative of our community and the input that they have given, and as well as yours. These are we shared these with you over the past few weeks, and didn't receive a lot of feedback to adjust or change, and so we are presenting these for your approval. Remember, these are annual goals that we adopt each year, so we would recommend that you approve these as presented.
Any questions from the board? I hear none. Do I have a motion, please?
Mr. Ferris, I move that we approve the board goals as presented.
Mr. Johnson, do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Regan? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And I hear none. Thank you very much. Moving on then to item number 9, consideration of possible approval of the 21-22 budget. Mr. Chase?
We pretty well extensively covered the proposal for the 2022 budget with the board in the public hearing, but this is the summary of the general fund, food service, debt service, and the combined total. And this is the adoptable format the EA prescribes us to adopt the budget in, and our recommendation is that we approve this budget as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Chase. Any further questions from the board? Dr. Terry, final comments?
No, just proud of this budget. It's been a challenging year, obviously, but so appreciative of John and his team and the work that they do to collect this, and just have to always compliment our board on your conservative approach, but also always putting our people first, which is always about 80 to 85% of our budget. So thank you for that. Thank you for supporting our kids, and we would recommend approval of the budget as presented.
Do I have a motion from the board?
Mr. Ferris, I make a motion that the board approve the 2021-2022 budget as presented.
Thank you, Ms. Green. May I have a second, please?
Second.
Mr. Andrews? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And I hear none. Budget is approved. Thank you very much. Moving on to number 10, consideration and possible approval of the 21-22 employee compensation plan. Mr. Chase?
Thank you, Mr. Ferris. The compensation plan was included in your budget packet for review. Basically, we've adjusted each one of the pay ranges by around 2% or so. We've also adjusted the compensation plan in the substitute pay category. I think in most daily rates for the subs, I think we went up about $10. Not every single one of them, but most of them we did $10 on. We already approved by prior board action, given the teachers the pay increase, the teacher salary schedule that's included in that board packet is reflective of what was already been approved, and also that teacher incentive allotment statement that's in there was approved by prior board action as well. So our recommendation is that the board approve this compensation plan as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Chase. Any questions from the board? I hear none. Dr. Terry, any final word?
Yes, sir. We continue to do market studies, and we're doing a good job. We're keeping up. I just wanted to compliment you on that as well, board, and also just to remind you, the retention stipend is included in this comp plan as well as in the budget. So that'll come around October, November as well. So recommend approval of the compensation plan as presented.
Thank you very much. Do I have a motion from the board?
Mr. Ferris will make a motion the board approve the 21-22 employee compensation plan as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. May I have a second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Green. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? I hear none, and that budget compensation plan is approved. Thank you very much. Moving on then to item number 11, consideration and possible approval of the 2021 TASB delegate and alternate selections. May I have any nominations from the board for the delegate and the alternate?
Mr. Ferris, I would nominate Scott Regan as our 2021 TASB delegate and Hannah Bateman as our TASB alternate.
Mr. Johnson's made a nomination for Mr. Regan and Ms. Bateman as alternate. Any other nominations? May I have a second?
Second.
Who wants to take it? Y'all fight over it. Dobbs? Ms. Dobbs seconds. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I hear none. So Mrs. Tier, if you'll please register that as Mr. Regan as a delegate and Ms. Baten as the alternate. Moving on then to item 12, a closed session. We took that out of order earlier, so move on then to item 13, consideration and possible approval of ratification employment of professional contract personnel. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Ferris, I move that we approve the ratification of the employment of professional contract personnel as discussed in closed session.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. May I have a second? Ms. Bateman, thank you very much. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I hear none, so it is approved. The next item is announcements. Dr. Terry.
Thank you, Mr. Ferris. Board, we do have a few just updates on our announcements and a few additions that should be at your place on the dais. So just a couple updates. First off, we are making an adjustment to our August meeting, and that will be Thursday, July 29th, if you'll take note of that. The first day of school is August 16th. Yes, that is August 16th, Ms. Dobbs. Then we do have an adjustment John was referencing earlier. Monday, first Monday of September is Labor Day. Therefore, we'd like to propose moving our regular meeting not till the 13th, but the 7th, which is a Tuesday, if that works for everyone's schedule. That just helps some of our tax notifications, or tax rate notifications, and keeps our approval for budget items a little less condensed, so, or more condensed. Then just as a reminder, TASA TASB, that conference to get your credit hours will be the 24th through the 26th. And if you do need to register, Nancy is picking up hotel rooms as well as any registration tonight. We'd love to have that so that we can beat that deadline coming up for hotel registration. And then we also have scheduled, rescheduled, and scheduled again now the Willett groundbreaking, and we've worked with Judge Willett's schedule, and it looks like Friday, October the 1st, we will go ahead and officially break ground, probably with a vertical structure. But we will definitely honor that process, and we just pray it will not rain on October the 1st.
That'll be our first freeze.
Our first freeze of the year. So that is Friday, August 1st at 5:30, and then you can come on to the Friday night football game over at Citibank. Regular board meeting on the 4th of October. That should be actually the first Monday in October. So any questions or anything, or concerns about the changes to the upcoming dates? All right, Mr. Ferris, I'm going to hand it back to you.
If you do have any conflicts or anything about that, please send an email, let him know. Thank you for the updates on those dates. Then I would say item 15 is adjournment, and we will adjourn this meeting at 8:14 p.m. Thank you very much. Have a great week.